All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at an oldie but a goodie. This is Transformers Classics Voyager class Megatron. Yeah, this is a pretty interesting figure. This is not one of the classics that I've had like since they came out. I just recently got this figure just because, at the time I didn't really want this to be my definitive Megatron. I've never really been a huge fan of the Megatron turning into a gun thing just because I don't really like mass shifting as a concept. So I generally prefer when he turns into like a tank or a plane or something like that. But, more recently, I did have kind of a curiosity about this figure and I wanted to pick it up. And yeah, it's a pretty neat toy, even if it doesn't, do what I would want it to do as a definitive Megatron. Just for the toy in and of itself, I think it's kind of fun. But yeah, they made the kind of interesting choice where, a while ago, obviously, they started passing laws where you couldn't, make toys of very realistic looking guns anymore, just for like safety reasons. So they made the choice to kind of sculpt Megatron after a Nerf gun, which is kind of interesting. I think it is actually supposed to be a specific Nerf gun. I'm not into Nerf enough to really be able to recognize it. I did pull one out that's kind of close. It's not exactly right, but we'll show that off in a bit. But yeah, it's a pretty good mode. I'd say it's a little bit small for like smaller than like an average Nerf gun. If you just like look at the handle compared to my hand, like it's tiny. Like you can still fit your hand around it and you can still, pull the trigger, and the trigger has a really nice satisfying like clicky sound, which I appreciate. This is definitely very satisfying to do. But no, it does not actually function in any way, shape, or form. You could not fire a real Nerf dart out of this, nor could you mod it to do that, because I will see when we start doing the transformation, but there is just no space in this thing for any sort of mechanism. But also, for safety reasons, it has to have like the orange tip. And part of that, is they also just like gave it a weirder color scheme, which is another reason why I feel like, this is one of the classic figures that people don't really like as much, just because it never really served as like a, very faithful update to Megatron, just because the colors are all wild. It turns into a different kind of gun. It has these like huge wings in robot mode. But like I said, as a toy, I think it's pretty cool. You can actually look through the scope. It doesn't, you can see through it. It doesn't magnify or anything like that, but that's still a neat touch. And I think this is just so you could get light through it, I want to say. I don't know. I'm not sure what this little thing is for, if it's even doing anything, but it might just be sculpting on there. But yeah, no, it's a pretty nice gun mode. For comparisons, I mean, for a standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. I didn't really think it made sense to show him off with the car, but there he is with the guy. I don't have any other Megatrons that actually turn into guns, I don't think, but here he is with Siege Shockwave, just for another, kind of role play gun item from a recent sort of toy line in Transformers. And then, as promised, here he is with a Nerf gun. Again, this was like the closest one that I had that I thought, it kind of approximated. And as you can see, it's like, a lot smaller. This is more like the size that a handle of a Nerf gun would be, as opposed to the little tiny handle there. But it can still fit in your hand, so it still works. So I don't know if this is the exact gun that it was modeled after. I don't think so, but some approximation. That's what he looks like with some version of the actual Nerf gun. And yeah, so starting off for transformation. Oh, I should also mention he has the little, like, well, I don't know what you call that. What's the name for that? The hammer? Has a little hammer back here. You can't really pull it back. It's just sculpted on there. I'm going to get a bunch of comments. I don't know if that's what it's called, but that part, that gun, I don't know guns. But yeah, to start off with transformation, you're going to immediately see what I mean about, no, this thing definitely cannot be modded, because he's kind of a weird shell former in a way, where like you take the two halves of like the huge shell of the gun here, and you kind of split them down the middle, and then you open them up like this, and this is how he's folded up in there, which is really interesting. He's got a very weird little like puzzle former thing going on. But then once you've opened up these two huge shells here, you just want to take the little clip sections and just fold them in like that, just to make it a little bit cleaner. Then you want to take this whole section with the scope on it and just move it up like this for now, just to give you the clearance to take this whole section with this one arm and then the body here. And you want to bring it up, rotate this around on that armature, and then bring it up like that and lock it into place. Then you just want to take this section here, rotate it around, and it'll click into place. And then we can just rotate this around so the tip of the gun there points up. And then you can take the other arm with the scope on it and then just bring it up on that armature so it locks into place like that. Then the legs here, one of the legs is the handle, but you know, the other one is just like the grip on the gun, which I think is really cool. You just kind of want to unhook the little knee pads here from this the piece with the trigger on it, so you can take this whole section and swing it back, and then take the wings, rotate them down like this so that you can use this clip right here, which will go into this orange little clip section right there. So you just want to double hinge it up like that and lock it in place and just leave those on the back just like that. Then you want to straighten out the legs and bring them down and rotate them forward. You want to take his little feet and they flip out from underneath, and then likewise with the heels here. What you're supposed to do, I generally don't do this, but just for the posterity's sake, I'll show it off because it's supposed to be a part of the transformation. You're supposed to take the actual like grip sections and slide them up. I generally think it looks worse like that, so I usually just leave them down, but that is a step that you're supposed to do. Let me just adjust the camera here a little bit. Then you want to take this arm and kind of just bring it down to the side like that on the ratchet, and then rotate it forward, open up this panel and flip out the hand here, which can be a little tricky sometimes, but it's not too bad, and then close that panel back up. And then for this arm, you want to rotate it around at the shoulder and then bring out the arm just like that. And then similarly, open up this panel. Then it's kind of easier to push this hand in from the other side just by like putting your finger in the hole here, and then taking the actual scope, which will double hinge up onto the arm and kind of lock into place. And then you can bring that panel back down, then open up this chest panel, revealing the head, which you can fold up, and then this long tab right here will go into this slot on the chest panel itself. And there you have Classics Megatron in his robot mode. And yeah, you know, like I said, it's not super accurate to G1 by any stretch of the imagination, like colors, silhouette, even like, you know, the sculpt of the face, but just as a different take on Megatron, I think it's kind of neat. Now, he does have the big obvious wings on the back, and they do weigh him down a little bit. I find that I wish that the heels just like didn't bend quite as far back as they do, because they bend just a little bit further than necessary, which means when it has some weight on it, it kind of does want to fall backwards. So what I generally do is I generally just like bring these up a little bit just to, you know, make him kind of stand up a bit more straight, but it can still kind of fall over a little bit. And like I said, yeah, I really prefer these down. I just think that looks a lot better. I appreciate that there is some joint there to change the shape, but it just makes his knees look like weirdly higher than they already are. And I just think that the lower leg looks more cohesive like this than like this. So I usually just leave him slid down, but you know, to each his own. Another thing about him that's not great is the fact that his cannon is kind of underslung on the back of his arm, which would be a kind of a, you know, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world just as a different take of Megatron. But the other problem with it is because it's so huge, it also just bumps into the wings. So you can't really have his arms like totally sitting straight back. You have to have them at this kind of like weird angle. I mean, this one you can have at whatever angle, but I usually try to make it kind of symmetrical to the other arm. So that's a little annoying. And then because it's on the back of his arm too, that doesn't help with the sort of like weighing him, you know, back problem. But I don't know, I still think it's pretty cool. In terms of articulation, the head is on a ball joint here, which has a really good range. Actually, it has kind of nice light piping too with the green eyes there. The shoulders are on a ratchet here at the shoulder, very satisfying ratchets all over this figure. Then a ratchet out to the side, a bicep swivel, ratcheted elbow. Nothing at the wrist unless you like, you know, move the panel and kind of move in the hand a little bit, but I don't think that really accomplishes anything. Nothing at the waist just because of how everything has to like hinge up and connect like that. It's totally locked in place. The hips can go forward and back on a ratchet and out to the side. And yes, unfortunately, he does do that infuriating thing that they kept doing for way longer than they should have, where he's got like the hip ratchets that, you know, it's either like this or like this, and there's no in between unless you're like making them asymmetrical. And I find that really annoying. He does have a thigh swivel, which I usually, you know, just leave them in their stock still configuration and then just widen the feet a little bit, and that helps him look a little bit more candid, but it's still not great. But yeah, just a regular thigh swivel, about 90 degrees of bend at the knee there, and then each of the, you know, the toes and the heels they can't really tilt up as much, but they can each tilt, you know, in just for how they work for transformation. So, you know, okay, articulation. He's got a lot of really satisfying ratchet joints, but I do find that they're a little bit limiting, because then you have things where it's like, yeah, his arm is either like this or like this, you know, his legs are either like this or like this, and it's, you know, the shoulders, you can't bring the shoulders just a little bit back, they have to go that far back. It's like, yeah, kind of the downfall of ratchets that don't have enough teeth in them, because like usually what I have to do is like just, you know, like I bring his arms out like this, kind of bend the elbows and then kind of rotate them in so they end up looking a little bit more candid, but then his hands are like weirdly rotated in, so it's not the best, but you know, it's okay, especially for this toy. Really, for me, is like I've never really wanted this to be like a you know, a good version of Megatron for my shelf. It's always just very much like, this is a toy, and I enjoy it as a toy as opposed to like a figure or like a representation of the character. But you know, I don't know what the distinction is there, but it's just fun as a toy, not necessarily as like a in-universe making sense kind of thing. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, I guess just for posterity, here he is again with the Nerf gun, just so you can see how it changes shape there. Again, also for posterity, here he is with Shockwaves, just because we showed them off together before. Here he is again with Kingdom's Sideswipe, just for that standard size deluxe comparison. Here he is with Siege Megatron, the actual definitive version of Megatron that I have on my shelf. So you can see, you know, Voyagers have gotten a bit smaller, but he's not actually like that enormous. I mean, unless you're counting the fact that he has this huge arm cannon and the huge wings there. So, you know, it's kind of a cool look there. So it's just funny, I guess, how he looks way more G1 accurate, even though he turns into a closer approximation of what G1 Megatron actually turned into. Just kind of a neat comparison there. And then last but not least, here he is with Classics Optimus Prime, just so you can see the two leaders look like together. He's definitely quite a bit taller. He can fall over sometimes. Definitely quite a bit taller than Classics Optimus Prime as well. So yeah, you know, he's a fun figure. Like I said, I've never really wanted this figure to be like a definitive version of Megatron, just because I've really never been attracted to the idea of Megatron turning into a gun. I much prefer now that they're like making him a tank most of the time, just because I feel like it makes a little bit more in-universe sense, but it is, you know, kind of a neat homage to the original figure. And, you know, if you're into Nerf, then it's kind of a cool item to have too, because it is, you know, pretty deliberately modeled after a Nerf gun, so that's kind of cool. And it, you know, it makes like the little orange details not feel as weird either, because like that's the thing that Nerf guns also have to have, so it feels a little bit more at home than, you know, when they have to put like an orange tip on like a you know, more gun-looking Megatron. But yeah, I don't know. He's a fun figure. He's not without his issues, but as a neat little novelty item and turning into the Nerf gun, I think it's pretty cool. And he's got a lot of really satisfying clicky stuff to him, especially with like the you know, the trigger and alt mode as well, even if he is kind of a huge shell former as well. So, you know, kind of a mixed bag, but I think he's neat. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Classics Voyager class Megatron.